thank you for joining us again on the Marketing Optimist Marketing Sandwich course. I think we're on session 15 now. It's kind of bloomed since we started this before Christmas. We were doing one a month. We've now gone on to doing one a week. So today we're going to speak to Emma Armytage, who is a HR expert, and I've known Emma a couple of years now. I think we first met at my mind's gone now. Where do we meet, Emma?
It was Tab.
Tab, yeah, the alternative board, yeah. So we were both members on the alternative board with Dougie Brown in Wakefield for a while. And so Tab, if anyone doesn't know, is a kind of it's almost like it is an independent board. That's what it's called, that obviously. So it's a grouping of owners and board directors who all sit down and kind of share their problems. I guess it's like kind of therapy in a way. You share your problems knowing full well that nobody in the room will spill the beans outside of the room, and it's a really good model. I suggest if anyone's interested in that, kind of look up Tab and seeing if it's for you. It's really good. So I'm at Emma at Tab. Must be 3 years ago, maybe even longer now.
Yeah, 2-3 years ago, definitely.
Yeah, at least 2 or 3 years ago. And Emma helped me in my early stages of the business to draw up my HR documents, so my contracts and my book. And actually, I probably need to come back to you at some point just to kind of check that they're also legal. So I guess I'll over to Emma if you want to introduce yourself a bit better and tell us a bit more about what it is you do.
Okay, so I'm Emma. My business is First Call HR, and I have been self-employed for about 6 years. 6 years at the beginning of March. Previously to that, I worked in HR in various businesses. For one reason or another, I've ended up predominantly in the sort of manufacturing, construction, warehousing kind of circle, probably because they swear a lot, which means I can. I don't think I'd be very good in retail where they don't swear very often. So that's kind of where my sweet spot is. It's the roll your sleeves up, it's the mucky industries, it's that kind of thing, and that's what I really like. But yeah, I've got clients ranging from a lot of manufacturing, warehousing, but right through I've got an IT client and all sorts of things. But I always wanted to be self-employed, but I just really like the fact that I get a buzz out of really helping people. You know, people come to me with their problems and I can work with them and make them better. I have this real thing about just be nice to people. And that's not in a soft way, that's treat people decently. You know, if we know that an employee is in the wrong, then yeah, they have to take the consequences. But if we do it properly, it's the right way to do it. You know, don't try and cut corners. But I always say to my clients, just, you know, tell me what you want the outcome to be. You know, don't pretend that I'm all virtuous and right. Tell me what you want the outcome to be, and we will work towards that. So if I'm not going to tell you a 15-stage performance plan, if actually you turn around and go, you know what, we just want to get rid of him. You know, tell me how you want it to work and we'll work that way. So I'll work very, very closely with clients like that. And that's what I like. It's good fun. I love it. And HR's a game at the end of the day. You just go play it well.
It's a game. I've never heard it discussed as a game.
It's a game, and I'm very good at playing it.
Excellent. Right, okay, well, hopefully we're gonna learn some moves, which would be good. So obviously there are kind of two sides to everything. Obviously there's an employee side and then the employer side, and I guess it's good to ensure that the two sides have obviously got different agendas in a way, and making sure that they both knit together to make sure the business works. I guess the big questions at the moment are obviously around coronavirus and everything that's gone on. Obviously the furlough schemes and the ever-evolving back-to-work process that is supposedly going to start rolling as of Sunday, I guess. Yeah. So I guess just some thoughts on that, Emma. What's the process? I guess initially around furloughing. How's that working?
I think the furlough scheme. I was reading something that something like 50% plus of the UK's wages are currently being paid by the government under the furlough scheme, which is just phenomenal. I do think that the uptake was a lot more than they anticipated it to be. And I think a lot of that might have come from the message that was pushed out. And I think there was a bit of confusion around which businesses could and should stay open. So I think a lot of businesses probably closed that didn't need to. And I've seen, I don't know if you guys are out and about, but I'm back into to the office, and I've noticed certainly the last week or so, the construction sites are picking up, the motorways getting busier. Yeah. And I think a lot of businesses that maybe reacted quickly and furloughed staff from the 1st of April, the furlough period has to be for a minimum of 3 weeks. So I think towards the end of April, they started to bring their staff back.
Right.
So I think the furlough scheme was great, and, you know, it certainly helps a lot of businesses out. But I think what we need to be doing now is planning how to bring people back to work.
Yeah.
We can't assume that the scheme's going to end at the end of June. I thought it was going to finish at the end of May. But I think the messages that are being pushed out is it's not going to last forever, or there's going to be some changes. And I think that the way to manage people, if you can, back to work, is to try and do it on a bit of a phased approach. So, for example, I've got a client who is a manufacturing client, and they never really closed, but they did furlough an awful lot of their staff. And what we've done almost is we've brought maybe 3 or 4 staff back every week. So we've brought those back. We've got gloves. We've closed the canteen effectively. So it's open for go in, make a brew, get your lunch and go back out again. But they can't hang around in there. They all have very staggered break times. So it's things like, you know, do we need to put a one-way system in? So in this particular factory, it's quite easy to do, but we've made a one-way system. So people are crossing. We've closed the canteen. We've staggered breaks. Other businesses I know are staggering start times. And I think a lot of what's going to come off the back of this is there's going to be a lot more of a push around flexible working. Yeah. Because actually, most employees have probably demonstrated that they can be just as productive if they're working from home as if they're in the office. And if the social distancing is going to have to carry on, I think there's going to be more of a push towards working from home. Maybe, like I said, staggering start times. So, you know, if we have everybody starting at 9 o'clock and they have to sign in, or they're all going to go and get a brew, you know, do we stagger start times? Do we have people coming in at 7, 7:30, and moving it that way? And I think other things that we probably need to think about when we're bringing people back, maybe off furlough, is that these people possibly have been away from work for the best part of 2, maybe 3 months. They've probably not had any contact. There are some people out there, and I know because one of the guys in my networking group mentioned it. He's been furloughed. He'd been at home for 5 weeks. Nobody had contacted him. Manager hadn't spoken to him. None of his colleagues had, because they're very strict with the you cannot work. And I think some businesses have taken that as you can't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So there are some people who are feeling incredibly isolated, particularly if they live on their own, who are feeling incredibly isolated. So I think it's a case of maybe recognising that when we're bringing people back to work, just going out and having a conversation with them. You know, we're coming back to work on this day. And maybe I've seen some ideas around do a return to work interview. Not necessarily as you would do if they were sick, but just to sit down, you know, I know it's been, you know, 3 months, how's everything at home? Yeah. You know, things have changed. This is how we're going to be doing things. Because some people, I think there's 2 groups of people. Some people are fairly blasé about it all and just want to get back to work. And then you've got others who are actually really nervous about it.
Yeah.
So it's a case of how do we reassure them? So I think getting them back on the first day and saying, right, so, you know, we're staggering break time, so there's going to be nobody in the canteen. You know, it's 1 in, 1 out in the loos. There's plenty of hand wash. Look, there's masks here if you want them. There's gloves if you want them. And just reassuring people at the outset rather than wait for them to come to you is probably going to make them feel a lot better about it. There is also the question, you know, of how do we make sure that we support them from a wellbeing point of view? Because, you know, there's awful lots of things going on in people's heads at the moment. We don't know whether people have been personally impacted by this. We don't know if they've maybe lost family members. And while we don't want to go and actually actively ask that question, you know, just saying, you know, how's things, you know, how much of an impact has this had on you? That will bring out the answers to, well, you know, we were all fine, but my wife's cousin's dad died, that kind of thing. So it gives you, and you will know your staff anyway, and you will know your colleagues, because it's not just from a management point of view, it can also be from a colleague point of view. One of the things that I saw on one of the HR websites the other day was around almost like a lessons learned. So if you've had people that have been working from home, or if you've been working from home, you know, it might be worth all sitting down and going, okay, so what lessons have we learned from working at home? Yeah. And it could be that actually I work better between 7 and 12, then I can have a few hours with the kids and then a couple of hours at night, and I'm being more productive than I am if I have to drive an hour into the office and then take my lunch break and go home at 5 o'clock. And I do genuinely think that that is going to cause people to reconsider their own working patterns and how they work. So, you know, what have we learned from working from home? What have we learned from being on furlough? So from a management team, what have we learned? How have we managed our staff when they've all been working remotely? You know, what's been good, what's been bad? Because I don't think we're going to go back to how we were on the 1st of January. It's how do we adapt? How do we take what we've learned from these 3 months and actually build it into our new business model moving forward? Yeah. So that's, I think, you know, the kind of things we need to be looking at when we're bringing people back into work. The other thing, the downside of all this, I think genuinely, and I know it's a fact, I'm talking to clients about it already, is there's not going to be enough work for everybody. If you employ a number of staff, it's unlikely if you bring people back at the 1st of July from a standing start, it's going to be very difficult to get everything up and running, to get the cash flow running, to get the order book full, because at the end of July, you're going to have to pay their salaries. So, you know, we need to start thinking now about, are we going to have to make some tough decisions? And if we are, let's start looking at it now. You know, let's not wait till the end of June and then it be a surprise. Let's be proactive. And the harsh reality of it is, at the moment, the government are paying the majority of people to stay at home, or they're paying 80%. If we know that we are going to have to cut some heads, why not take advantage of that? Why not take advantage of the fact that if you've got people that you need to give a month's notice to through a redundancy process, and the government are going to pay them for June, there is nothing in any guidelines that say that notice pay cannot be claimed under furlough.
That's
so,
interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of businesses are doing that. A lot of businesses are going through consultation periods at the moment and are starting to put people on notice, and they're claiming notice. There's a dispute over whether, if you've agreed to be furloughed at 80%, have you fundamentally agreed for your salary now to be at 80%, so therefore your notice pay would be the 80%.
Right.
I think that feels a bit harsh. Yeah. I think from a best practice point of view, you can top up that 20% maybe if cash flow allows, and pay their notice at full pay. But there is nothing to say that people who are on furlough cannot be on their notice period. Yeah. And also with holidays as well. There's a lot of businesses that, you're bearing in mind tomorrow's bank holiday. So, and Easter, we had 2 bank holidays in Easter. For people who are furloughed, there are 2 different ways you can manage holidays. So you could either say, from a cash flow point of view, we can't afford to treat your holidays as holiday, because again, holiday pay, in order for them not to feel like they're losing out, I would recommend is paid at 100%. Yeah. So again, you're topping up that 20%. Some businesses from a cash flow point of view can't afford to do that. So what they are doing is they are taking the bank holidays. And remember, bank holidays are just another holiday. Unless you've got very old contracts that treat bank holidays differently, bank holidays are just a day off the holiday allowance that a lot of people take. So what some businesses are doing is saying, no, 80% all the way through. But what we'll do is we will take the 2 holidays for Easter, we will take the VE day, and we will add it back onto your holiday allowance when you come back to work. That's interesting, because they are bank holidays. There's no real, effectively, even though you've not gone anywhere, not effectively taking a holiday because it was going to go anywhere. Yeah. But they could pay that, and I guess that is one of those things where that's more. I don't know. Is that more a graceful thing to do rather than a legal thing to do? How would that happen in a normal working process? Well, there's 2 schools of thought. I think from a good practice point of view, you are going to get pushback if you make staff or enforce staff taking holidays. You know, bearing in mind that we've just had the Easter holidays, we're going to have the half-term school holiday in May. Many people will have booked that as holiday. Mm-hmm. What a lot of businesses are doing is saying, actually, we're not letting anybody cancel holidays, but so you don't lose out, we're going to top that up to 100%. So if you were due to be on holiday that week, we'll top it up. Because the other thing to consider is, if you don't leave those holidays as they are, when everybody comes back to work in July, you are going to have the whole, because they still accrue holidays while they're on furlough. You're going to have potentially a much bigger, if your holidays are on January to December, not many people are going to have the first 3 months off. Yeah. People come back in July, you've got 6 months in which to fit most of your staff's full year's holiday entitlement.
Yeah.
And they have changed the working time regulations to say that you can allow those to carry over. But for a small business with maybe only 3 or 4 staff, that's a big thing to have to fit into your work schedule.
I mean, just to kind of highlight that's an issue that's facing us. And I spoke to Sophie and Chris, who's not on the call, about that the other day. Holidays, they can still take holidays, but obviously I understand their reluctance to take holidays because, well, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
You're not gonna, okay, so I'm sat at home. Well, I'm sat at home anyway. So I get that reluctance. So I think we are looking at being able to, we wouldn't normally, but looking at pushing those holidays to be able to be taken in the next year. But that, it sounds like a small thing, but that in itself causes an issue.
It disrupts
because it's disruption, and next year's becomes a mess. And then how does that work with work that we need to produce? So those kind of things all have a knock-on effect. And these are some of the things that are happening, I guess, to businesses. Because like I said to you earlier, we haven't furloughed anybody. We're still busy, so we've not furloughed. But the fact that just the working conditions mean that we're going to be affected by that holiday shortage. I understand that Sophie and Chris don't want to take a holiday. Why would you? Because what are you going to do with it? Obviously, we've taken bank holidays because nobody's working. That's a given. But they're not going to book 2 weeks off. It's like, well, no. Why would I do that?
Yeah. I mean, it might be, if you have got staff who are working from home, and I think there's other stuff that I've been looking at, that people who are working from home, their day is, they don't switch off as easily maybe. And you might have noticed that if you're working from home, it's like, especially if you're not set up to work from home. So you've got your laptop on the dining room table, or you've got your laptop on the bench in the kitchen. And sometimes, I'll just finish off doing this. And especially, I think there are people who think, well, I stopped and I've had an hour with the kids, or I went to put the washing on, so I'll just do a little bit more, bit more. And I think it's a balance if you have got staff working at home as to how to make sure they do stop and they do get a break. Yeah,
and I guess that all adds to the problem of it being distance working. So when Sophie's in the office, I can see what she's doing. I can say, well, you're working a bit late tonight, get yourself off. Whereas when we're not in constant contact, but obviously if Sophie suddenly decides she's still working at 7:30 at night, I can't see her and go, stop working, Sophie, at 7:30 at night. I can't see her.
Yeah, and so there's kind of managing that, and I think that is, like I said before, I think that is going to change how a lot of people work, because that might be the better way for it. It might be that if you've got somebody and they've got kids who typically would come home from school, and they may, if they don't want to work between 3 and 6, but they want to start early and they do a couple of hours in the evening, if that works better for them and they're still delivering, I think as an employer, you're going to have a real difficulty to justify further down the line why you couldn't accept that under some form of formal flexible working request.
Yeah.
I think, this has thrown up a lot more possibilities around the whole flexible working and working from home thing.
Yeah, because I've spoken to quite a lot of business people over the last few weeks, and a lot of people, even those that you would consider in traditional industries, are now considering being much more flexible with their workforce. And some have learnt some really valuable lessons in terms of understanding that actually people do work from home when they say they're working from home, and you can see that productivity. So I think it will make some big changes. I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
The interesting thing on the holiday side, I don't know, maybe this isn't a conversation we should have at the moment, Richard, with Sophie listening in. Maybe the other option, I suppose, would be that you actually buy back the holiday, essentially, because what I'm thinking is next year, and possibly even the year after, you're facing some potential disruption to the business.
Yeah.
And you might need to think to yourself, well, for the sake of avoiding that disruption, would it be more cost effective to actually say to Sophie and Chris and to your staff, well, how about if I pay you a bit more money, but you don't take the holiday? That. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you're probably not working as hard at the moment as you would be normally, so you probably don't need the holiday in quite the same way that you would have done before. The reality is, unfortunately, none of us can go anywhere anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I definitely, me personally, I definitely need a holiday, but there's nowhere to go. So
Well, precisely, yeah.
So what's the point in taking it?
Yeah.
But that's a good point.
You know, what's the point in having a day off? What would I do?
Yeah,
well,
exactly. So you may as well get, you know, if your employer is prepared to put a little bit more money into your bank account, and you sacrifice a few days, even, you know, I'm not suggesting that you sacrifice all of your holiday, obviously. No. But if you sacrifice some holiday, and your employer was able to provide some sort of remuneration for that, or some other benefit in kind, it would help everybody. And it might also reduce the potential risk of redundancy, of course.
You would just make sure that you didn't fall in breach of any of the working time regulations.
Yeah.
So the working time regulations are 20 days plus bank holidays. You couldn't touch them, but if you offer enhanced holidays, so if you offer 25 days, you're right, you could buy back those 5 days, but you couldn't touch the protected ones. The enhanced holidays, you could do something with. You're right.
Yeah,
it might help.
That's interesting, because you know, sometimes I'm a bit freewheeling. HR is not necessarily my strong point, which is why we're talking to you, Emma. So sometimes I can be a bit freewheeling and go, you know what, you can just buy it. Yeah, that's fine. But I don't. But clearly, as you just pointed out, I wouldn't want to be in contravention of working time regulations, because that just opens you up to a whole mess, doesn't it, potentially?
I think it's really, really interesting. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Cancel. I'm just going. I think it's really interesting looking at just a random observation from looking at a lot of businesses that, interestingly, it tends to be the smaller employers with maybe 2, 3 or 4 staff are the ones that offer the enhanced holiday packages. You know, the normal, bigger, traditional businesses, they will stick with the 20 days plus 8, whereas it's the smaller ones that really want to nurture the staff, keep them, develop them, look after them, are the ones that do offer the enhanced holiday and enhanced sick pay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember when you drew up my contracts, we've got in a duvet day and you get your birthday off.
I use that example. I don't name you, but I use that example a lot when I'm talking to people about contracts.
Yeah,
I think it's brilliant. I think it's a great example of an employer who wants to get people and keep them.
Yeah, and we build that in. Well,
you're looking at us, but
yeah, but I'm sure Sophie was nodding and says there. But yeah, so as you well know, I built that into our contract from day one. It wasn't. It was kind of from the very beginning, and we've also got a thing where after 2 years you get an extra day's holiday, accruing up to an extra 5, to try and do that, to be flexible and understanding. I've got a question that keeps coming up for a lot of, obviously from when I was a startup, there were a lot of people who are running their business and they're like a limited director or whatever, and for whatever reason they've had to furlough themselves. There seems to be a lot of confusion around what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. So obviously they're not able to kind of go and sell or do anything material. They're supposed to be just able to just do admin. But a lot of people are saying, well, does admin just also include ringing up my clients and going, are you all right, just to kind of keep a contact, or not? And I think there seems to be some grey theory out there.
Yeah, I think and it doesn't help with the fact that the legislation, the government guidelines changes. They have a really bad habit of changing it either at 4 o'clock on a Friday or 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. And particularly when the furlough stuff was all kicking off, the guidelines, you know, you'd go on the Facebook page before you went to bed, there's a HR forum I belong to, and it'd be like, oh, they've updated it again. So if you are a director of a limited company, you can furlough yourself. And what the guidelines say is you can only carry out your statutory duties of a director. So it's not even as wide as admin. It's like signing off the company accounts, updating stuff on company's house. It is the statutory duties, the fiduciary duties of a director. That is all you can carry out. The guidelines around working is anything that would bring work or revenue to your business. Right. So again, if we've got staff on furlough, and a lot of businesses, and to be fair, you know, they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. One of my clients is a charity, and they came to me and said, can we furlough all our staff because we haven't got any money coming in? Absolutely, you can. But then the staff are coming back and going, well, I'll just do it for free. I'll just help. The guidelines say I can volunteer. The guidelines say you can volunteer, but not for your employer. So you can't. So you can do volunteer work. You can drop off food packages for the old people. You can, and actually they've updated to that you can work for somebody else. So you can be furloughed from your employer and you can drive a van for Tesco.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fine. But what you can't do is any work for your employer that will either bring work or revenue. The only thing that really they can do is training. You can do training with them.
Right. Okay. I was going to ask about that. Yeah, because that was I've got a training client, so that's quite interesting that they can still go through training processes.
They can still go through training, but they would have to be paid the hours that they do the training at their full pay.
Ah. Okay. That's interesting as well.
There was some stuff that came up around both apprentices and the minimum wage, because obviously the minimum wage was increased at the beginning of April.
Yeah.
If you're paying 80% of the salary on furlough, technically you're dropping below the minimum wage.
Wow. Okay.
But what the guidelines are saying is you have to be paid the minimum wage for the time that you work. If you're furloughed, you're not working. So that's how we got around the fact that actually they were paid below the minimum wage earnings if they were on furlough. But with apprentices, if they had a day at college or the equivalent, they would have to be paid their rate of pay for those hours that they were at college, that they were training, that they were learning. But then the rest of the time they would be paid at the 80%. Does that make sense?
It does. This is why I don't know anything to do with HR. It's too complicated for me because there's lots of ends and turns in it.
I think
that's really interesting. That's interesting.
You ought to stop at this point.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's interesting because I'd say a lot of people who I know who are basically owner managers, and they just work for themselves, were in that point where they're kind of going, well, I can just, all right, well, I can't work, but where does that stop? Can I just,
where's the line between working and not working?
Yeah. So, for example, can I be posting on LinkedIn? Does that count as working? Do you know what I mean? There must be so many kind of grey spots where you go.
Yeah, I would say if it will bring you possibly revenue or work, then it's work. So again, networking is another thing. You know, can I go networking? You kind of deep down in your heart know that that's classed as work because it's bringing in revenue or work for your employer, for your business. Yeah.
It's an interesting point you made as well about the fact that it'll take several months for work to start coming back. On a previous webinar, we talked to Chris Rabbit, who was talking about sales, and he was saying that the ideal thing is you need to keep your sales function, keep it going, because if you stop, it's going to take 2-3 months for that sales function to kind of get moving, to kind of get orders in, to get producing, if it's manufacturing or whatever else it is. And that's going to be the reality. So businesses come back who might have been in manufacturing. The reality is that everyone else is coming back. They're all ramping up at the same time. There's a kind of a step change. So even once they come back, there's still be a couple of months before things actually get back anywhere near to what they were.
I mean, one of my clients, we're talking about we're going to have to reduce some heads. We can't get away with it. So we may as well start doing it now. But interestingly, when we kind of went through each department, and it's like, right, okay, so this department, how many have we got? How many can we run it on? And really, the only department that they didn't want to touch at the initial stage was the sales department, because they need the sales team out to bring in the sales to keep the rest of the business going. So the sales and the marketing, the message that I've been hearing from people is, you need to keep your marketing going. You should be keeping your marketing going all this time. You should be keeping your salespeople talking to people and just reminding people who they are. Yeah. Rather than actively doing the selling thing.
Yeah. I just like to point out, I didn't pay Emma to say that about you should keep your marketing going.
But
but thanks for that.
It also very much depends on your lead times in terms of your business as well, of course, because we didn't really introduce each other, but I'm in the recruitment side of things, and obviously that's gone very, very quiet. But I'm also in a number of groups that we're talking about what our strategies are going to be. And one of the leading businesses in our group was saying that he's not really worried about the next quarter. He's actually worried about Q3 and Q4 and then Q1 of next year, because it can often be 3 months before you, from the point at which you start a conversation with a client, before you actually get paid. And it's that problem. So if you're a company like us, where your lead time is typically 3 months from engagement to actually getting the sale, then you're absolutely right. You need to keep the sales momentum going. You have to, because otherwise you're going to hit a blank wall at some point.
And I think with you guys, the more executive and higher level recruitment, the longer the process.
Absolutely,
so, I'm still getting emails off recruitment agencies that are temps, and it's like, oh, we've got loads of temps, and temps is very churny, very quick out, but doesn't bring a lot of money, but it's the executive, the higher level recruitment, but it takes a long time, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a huge problem for the recruitment industry in my area, at least, because of that. I mean, I don't do any temp work at all. I have no interims out, and that's causing me, a lot of headaches at the moment.
Yeah.
And obviously, the other side of that, and it's something I was going to talk to you about as well, is sort of looking at how you restructure your business as well, and looking at things like outplacement consultancy, for example, which I'm familiar with, not least of which because I've done it myself in the past. But looking at changing, and I think that's the other aspect of this is there's going to be a lot of companies out there that probably change their, if not their core activity, certainly diversify into other areas. And that's certainly something that I'm looking at doing at the moment. I was interested, you obviously specialise in engineering and in the manufacturing industries, which ironically is where I also tend to focus.
Right.
What are companies doing about things like deep cleaning? Because obviously that's an issue as well.
We have a few. So the one where we're drip feeding staff back, some of them employ their own cleaners. So we have had the cleaner came back. She was one of the first ones that came back.
Yeah.
And they her hours are quite weird anyway. So we've worked it that almost she comes in midday. She works it around her family. She's got quite a bit of flexibility. So she comes in midday and she cleans everything down. And then she will come back when the night shift are on. And then she will do effectively the other half of her day.
Yeah.
So she's managing it that way.
Okay.
From a deep cleaning point of view, that's not really come up, which is quite interesting. They seem to be, there's a lot of, the day-to-day, the wipes and all that kind of thing, but actually nobody's mentioned bringing in sort of specialist deep cleaning and doing all that. That might be, that's probably something.
That's something that the schools are looking at, isn't it? I mean, when this first hit, I know that some of the schools were staying open for key worker children, and they were saying there that they would only go back once they deep cleaned. And I think, and council's the same. I guess public sector is always going to be a little bit more cautious, should we say, than private sector. But I would have thought that in manufacturing, particularly, deep cleaning would be something that you'd need to consider.
Just to kind of declare an interest, we've got a client who's a pest controller, and they are actually doing deep cleaning already. They've got the deep cleaning misting equipment, as it's called. And they've started doing that this week. So they've started doing. We've seen videos of new deep cleanings going off, mainly in an office environment at this point, but not necessarily in manufacturing. But I know they do that too. So it's a thing, and consequently, I am aware that the searches for deep cleaning, office deep cleaning, and that type of searches were virtually flat all year. And then in February and March, they went off the charts. They really spiked out of nowhere. So it's something that demand is coming up for that, and I think probably it's a new industry that will start blossoming after this. And I guess that's the interesting thing after all this, that all talk of furloughs and people laying people off. There are going to be new industries that are going to appear after this, definitely.
Yeah. And I think from an HR perspective, and probably more from a legal standpoint, there will be workers that return to factories and will be saying to their employers, well, have you cleaned this equipment? And I can foresee, I mean, not that we're a particularly litigious economy, but you can imagine people going back to work and saying, well, my employer hasn't cleaned my workplace thoroughly, and that's a danger to me.
We had one of my clients has been involved with some of the Nightingale hospitals, the kind of structural work around that, and they had one of their guys who went to site on the first day and raised a raft of concerns. They haven't got enough PPE, they're not controlling access to the lifts. The guys, and by the nature of the job they were doing, a lot of the stuff they can't work 2 meters apart, but there was an awful lot of fixes that had to be kind of put in place very quickly overnight. Because there were people, they rocked up on site on the first day, and there wasn't even stuff like enough hand sanitizers, so they had to do that very quickly. And I think there's going to be a lot more health and safety litigation back as well.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, I've just the last placement I made, in fact, this year, which is horrific, really, when I think about it. But the last one I made was for a health and safety manager for a company, a manufacturing business, and he's actually not able to start with the company until June. But I mean, his work is going to be really, his workload is going to be huge, I would think, because he's going to have sorts of challenges to face that he wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do think we're going to be going back to work in a different world than the one we all left in February. I think it's going to be very different.
I agree.
So I'm going to start winding up now. Does anyone have any questions specific for Emma that we've not managed to get through? I think we've covered quite a lot.
No, it was really useful, interesting.
That's it. Good. I'm glad you got something from it.
Cool. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emma. I have been recording this, so it's going to be on the YouTube channel. And then it'll be shared out on social and all those other things, so people can catch up if they've missed it. Next week we have a very special one, which is our Dragon's Den special. So next Friday at 12:30, we're speaking to 3 former contestants from Dragon's Den to try and find out what it was like, what they learned from it, and would they do it again? Would they suggest it to other people? I have a feeling I know the answer to all those questions, but you guys have to. I'm going to find out what they actually think. But I know them quite well, so I'll be interested to see what happens. So next week is the Dragon's Den special, and then just check back on the website for the rest of our webinars that are going to continue. Hopefully, we'll keep doing one. We'll keep doing one a week because that seems quite neat. All right, guys. So thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.